The silence of deep space pressed against the observation deck windows like a living thing. Jade Rivers adjusted her headset and leaned closer to the console, watching streams of data cascade down her screen in luminous green waterfalls. Station Horizon 7 floated in the void between star systems. Its primary mission to monitor deep space communications and catalog cosmic phenomena. Tonight, however, something was different. Jade had been working the night shift for 3 years, and she knew the rhythm of space like a musician knows their instrument. Solar wind patterns, pulsar emissions, the distant chatter of colony ships. But what she was hearing now defied every classification protocol in the database. The signal wasn't coming from any known source. It pulsed with an irregular heartbeat, buried deep beneath layers of cosmic radiation like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, isolating frequency bands and filtering out background noise. The signal grew stronger, more distinct. It wasn't random electromagnetic, static. There was structure here, patterns that suggested intelligence. Her breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her. This was a message. The communications bay doors hissed open behind her, and Captain Rylan Cross stepped into the dimly lit chamber. Even in the blue glow of the monitoring equipment, Jade could see the concern etched across his weathered features. His dark hair was disheveled, suggesting he'd been pulled from sleep by the priority alert she'd triggered. "What do we have, Rivers?" His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to command, but there was something else there, too, an edge of anticipation that seemed oddly out of place for a routine signal investigation. Jade turned in her chair, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened whenever Cross entered a room. Professional boundaries had become increasingly difficult to maintain during their long shifts together in the Outer Rim. "Unknown transmission, Captain. Deep space origin, highly encrypted. The pattern suggests artificial intelligence, but the encoding is unlike anything in our databases." Cross moved closer, his presence warming the space around her workstation. He studied the waveform displays with an intensity that made Jade wonder if he recognized something she'd missed. "How long? Have you been tracking it?" "About 4 hours. I've tried every standard decryption protocol, but the signal keeps evolving. It's almost like it's learning from my attempts to decode it." She pulled up a 3-dimensional representation of the signal structure, rotating it slowly in the holographic display. "Look at this complexity. The mathematical relationships are beautiful, but they don't follow any known linguistic patterns." Cross reached past her to adjust one of the display parameters, his hand briefly brushing against hers. The contact sent an electric thrill up her arm that had nothing to do with the mysterious transmission. "Have you considered that it might not be linguistic at all? What if it's something else entirely?" Before Jade could respond, the signal suddenly changed. The steady pulse transformed into something that sounded almost musical, a haunting melody that seemed to resonate directly with something deep in her chest. The equipment registered massive spikes in harmonic frequencies as the transmission grew exponentially stronger. "Cross, are you seeing this?" Jade's voice was barely a whisper as she watched her instruments light up like a festival display. The signal wasn't just growing stronger, it was synchronizing with her equipment, learning to speak their language in real time. The captain's hand found her shoulder, steadying her as the station's lights flickered. "Stay with it, Jade. Try to establish a dialogue." She looked up at him, surprised by his use of her first name. In 3 years of service, he'd always maintained strict professional protocol. But now his gray eyes held an urgency that made her wonder what he wasn't telling her about this mission. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, inputting a basic mathematical sequence, prime numbers, simple and universal. If there was intelligence behind this signal, mathematics would be their common ground. She transmitted the sequence and waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. The response came immediately. Not just the same sequence, but an elaborate mathematical poem that built upon her simple offering and transformed it into something achingly beautiful. The alien intelligence wasn't just answering her, it was showing off, demonstrating a grasp of mathematical concepts that made human achievements look like children's drawings. "My God," Cross breathed beside her. They're actually communicating. But as Jade continued the exchange, something unexpected began to happen. The mathematical dialogue started to shift, becoming more than just numbers and equations. Images began to form in her mind, fleeting and dreamlike, but undeniably real. A world of crystal spires reaching toward twin suns, beings of impossible beauty moving through gardens of living light. And at the center of it all, a love story so profound it made her chest ache with borrowed longing. She saw them as clearly as if she were there, two beings whose love transcended the boundaries of flesh and energy. Zephyr, whose name came to her like a half-remembered song, and Celestine, radiant as starlight. Their bond was more than romantic. It was cosmic, a connection that had shaped the very fabric of reality around them. But then came the darkness, betrayal, imprisonment, separation across the vast gulf of space and time. Zephyr's anguish echoed through the transmission. 3,000 years of solitude and desperate longing compressed into a signal that traveled the void, seeking any soul capable of understanding. Jade gasped and pulled back from the console, the psychic connection severing abruptly. The visions faded, leaving her disoriented and emotionally raw. Cross immediately moved to support her, his strong hands gentle on her shoulders. What happened? What did you see? She looked up at him, struggling to find words for the impossible experience. There's someone in that signal, Cross. A consciousness that's been alone for millennia. They're not just trying to communicate with us. They're trying to share their story, their pain. Tears she couldn't explain ran down her cheeks. They loved someone, and they lost them. The transmission isn't just a message, it's a cry for help. Cross's expression grew thoughtful, almost troubled. Jade, I need you to be very careful with this signal. Don't try to decode it alone anymore. There are forces in the universe that we don't fully understand, and some of them are dangerous. What aren't you telling me? She demanded, studying his face in the blue light of the monitors. You knew something about this transmission before I found it, didn't you? Before he could answer, the signal changed again. This time, the transmission bypassed their equipment entirely and spoke directly into their minds. A voice like wind chimes and starlight filled the communications bay. I am Zephyr of the Crystal Realm, bound for 3,000 rotations of this star system, seeking the one whose heart can hear across the void. You who have touched my thoughts, will you help me find my way home to love? The alien presence filled the room like a gentle tide, bringing with it the scent of impossible flowers and the warmth of twin suns. Jade felt her consciousness expanding, touching briefly on vast alien knowledge and emotions so profound they made human feelings seem pale by comparison. Cross stepped protectively in front of her, his hand moving instinctively to the weapon at his side. Jade, break the connection. Now, but she couldn't. The alien consciousness had found something in her that resonated with their ancient pain, and the link between them was growing stronger by the moment. Through Zephyr's memories, she experienced the joy of perfect love and the agony of loss that had driven them to send their signal across the galaxy, hoping against hope that somewhere in the universe was a heart capable of understanding. I can't break it, she whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. They need help, Cross. They've been alone for so long. The captain's jaw tightened with an emotion she couldn't identify. Fear, perhaps, or recognition. That alien has been imprisoned for good reason, Jade. My grandfather was part of the expedition that put them there. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Suddenly, Cross's knowledge of the signal made terrible sense. This wasn't a first contact situation. It was the return of something that had been deliberately hidden away. But as she looked into Zephyr's borrowed memories, she saw not a monster, but a soul broken by loss and injustice. Your grandfather was wrong, she said quietly, feeling the alien's pain resonate in her bones. Zephyr isn't dangerous. They're just trying to find their way back to someone they love. The transmission pulsed brighter, and suddenly the communications bay filled with the ghostly image of the crystal world Jade had seen in her visions. Zephyr materialized before them, not as the fearsome alien of Cross's warnings, but as a being of ethereal beauty, whose very presence seemed to elevate the mundane space around them. I mean no harm to your kind, Zephyr spoke, their voice a harmony of impossible tones. I seek only what was torn from me, the chance to love and be loved in return. For 3 millennia, I have called across the void, and now you have answered. Will you help me break the bonds that keep me from my heart's desire?" Cross drew his weapon, though his hand trembled as he aimed it at the shimmering figure. "You are imprisoned because you threaten the stability of entire star systems. Your bond with Celestine was causing reality distortions that could have torn the galaxy apart." "We never meant to cause harm," Zephyr replied, their form flickering with what might have been tears. "We loved too deeply, too completely. Our bond resonated with the fundamental forces of creation itself. But exile was not justice, it was fear." Jade stepped between them, her hand gently pushing Cross's weapon aside. "There has to be another way. Look at them, Cross. This isn't a monster. This is someone who loved so deeply that the universe itself responded to their emotion." The alien's gratitude washed over her like warm sunlight. "You understand, daughter of Earth? Love is not meant to be caged, no matter how powerful it becomes. I do not ask you to release me without consideration. I ask only that you listen to my story, see through my eyes the truth of what transpired, and judge for yourself whether 3,000 years of solitude is justice for the crime of loving." Completely Cross lowered his weapon but didn't holster it. "If I allow this, Jade, you could be putting yourself in danger. The psychic link you've established with them is growing stronger. Eventually, you might lose yourself entirely to their alien perspective." Jade felt the truth of his concern, but also the overwhelming pull of Zephyr's loneliness. In her mind, she could see fragments of the alien's memories, a love so pure and transformative that it had literally reshaped reality around them. If there was even a chance that Zephyr's imprisonment was unjust, didn't they deserve to have their story heard? "I need to know the truth," she said finally. "If there's a way to help them reunite with Celestine without endangering the galaxy, shouldn't we try to find it?" Cross holstered his weapon with obvious reluctance. "Against my better judgment, I'll give you 12 hours to explore their story. But at the first sign that this connection is affecting your health or sanity, I'm cutting the link permanently." Zephyr's form brightened with hope, and suddenly, the sterile communications bay filled with the impossibly beautiful harmonies of their home world. "Thank you, guardians of this realm. Let me show you a love that spans the cosmos, and perhaps, together, we can find a way to heal what was broken so long ago." As the alien's consciousness touched hers more deeply, Jade felt herself being drawn into a story of love and loss that would challenge everything. She thought she knew about the nature of existence itself, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if Cross's concerns were justified. Was she falling under the influence of an alien intelligence? Or was she simply recognizing a truth about love that humans had forgotten in their pursuit of safety and control? The transmission pulsed stronger, and the first chapter of an impossible love story began to unfold in her mind. 3 days had passed since the initial contact, and Jade Rivers found herself living between 2 worlds. During her waking hours, she performed her duties aboard Horizon 7 with mechanical precision, running diagnostics and monitoring routine transmissions. But when she closed her eyes, she walked through crystal gardens under alien stars, experiencing fragments of Zephyr's memories with increasing clarity and emotional intensity. The alien's story unfolded like a cosmic symphony in her mind. She witnessed the first meeting between Zephyr and Celestine on a world where thought and matter danced together in perfect harmony. Their courtship had been a gradual awakening of consciousness itself. 2 souls discovering that their combined essence could reshape reality through the pure force of their devotion. Dr. Nova Blackwood arrived on the morning shuttle. Arrival unannounced and oddly urgent for a routine xenobiological consultation. Jade watched through the observation deck as the sleek transport docked with their station, noting the unusual military escort that accompanied what should have been a simple scientific visit. "So you're about the signal," Cross said quietly, appearing beside Jade at the window. His presence had become a constant comfort over the past few days, though she sensed his growing concern about her deepening connection with Zephyr. Fleet Command sent her to evaluate the situation. Dr. Blackwood was a striking woman in her mid-30s with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of piercing intelligence that made people uncomfortable. She carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room, and her first action upon boarding was to demand access to all communication logs related to the alien transmission. "This is highly irregular, Captain Cross," she said, reviewing the data in the station's briefing room. "You've allowed continued contact with an imprisoned entity without proper containment protocols. The psychic contamination alone could compromise this entire facility." Jade felt a flash of anger at the clinical terminology. Psychic contamination? We're talking about a conscious being who's been alone for 3 millennia. This isn't contamination, it's communication. Dr. Blackwood's green eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. "Miss Rivers, I've reviewed your psychological profile. You scored exceptionally high on empathic sensitivity during your academy evaluations. That makes you particularly vulnerable to alien influence. How certain are you that your thoughts are still entirely your own?" The question hit uncomfortably. Close to home? Jade had been wondering the same thing, especially when she found herself humming melodies that didn't exist in human music or understanding. Mathematical concepts that should have been beyond her training. But when she touched Zephyr's consciousness, the connection felt natural, like coming home after a long journey. "I'm still myself," she said firmly. "Zephyr isn't trying to control me. They're sharing their experiences, helping me understand what really happened during their imprisonment." Cross leaned forward in his chair, his expression troubled. "Jade, there are things about my family's involvement in this situation that I haven't told you. My grandfather's expedition logs describe reality distortions around Zephyr and Celestine that threatened entire solar systems. Ships would emerge from hyperspace to find that the laws of physics had been locally rewritten. Stars aging backwards, planets existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Love that powerful isn't natural," Dr. Blackwood added. "It suggests artificial enhancement or some form of cosmic manipulation. We need to consider the possibility that these beings were conducting experiments that could have destabilized the galaxy." Through her link with Zephyr, Jade felt the alien's pain at these accusations. She closed her eyes and let their memories flow through her, seeing the truth of what had happened on that distant world. The reality distortions hadn't been intentional. They were the natural result of two consciousness evolving beyond the normal boundaries of individual existence. "You're wrong," she said softly, opening her eyes to find both Cross and Dr. Blackwood watching her with concern. Their love wasn't artificial, it was evolution. They discovered that consciousness isn't limited to individual minds. When two beings achieve perfect unity, they can touch the fundamental forces that shape reality itself. Dr. Blackwood made notes on her tablet with quick, precise movements, classic signs of alien psychological influence. "Ms. Rivers, I'm recommending immediate quarantine and cognitive restructuring therapy." "No." Cross's voice carried absolute authority. "Jade hasn't shown any signs of hostile influence. If anything, her connection with Zephyr has enhanced her abilities. Her technical insights over the past 3 days have been extraordinary." It was true. Jade had found herself understanding the station's communication systems in ways that surprised even her. She could sense data flows like living currents, predict equipment failures before they happened, and interpret signal patterns with an intuition that went beyond technical training. That evening, alone in her quarters, Jade deliberately opened her mind to Zephyr's presence. The alien consciousness embraced her like warm starlight, and suddenly she was no longer aboard the station but standing in a vast crystalline chamber, where two beings of impossible beauty moved together in a dance that rewrote the laws of physics. Around them, Zephyr appeared as a figure of living light, their forms shifting between masculine and feminine aspects as their emotions changed. Beside them, Celestine blazed with the radiance of a newborn star, her consciousness so vast and loving that nearby matter spontaneously reorganized itself into increasingly complex and beautiful patterns. "Watch closely, dear Jade," Zephyr whispered. In her mind, see how love became our downfall. The vision showed her the moment when their bond had reached critical mass. As Zephyr and Celestine achieved perfect psychic unity, their combined consciousness began to resonate with the quantum field that underlies all reality. Space twisted around them. Time flowed in spirals. The very fabric of existence rippled outward from their embrace. But Jade could see what the expedition logs had missed. The distortions weren't chaotic or dangerous. They were creative, transformative. Worlds touched by their love experienced spontaneous evolution. Life forms advanced thousands of years in moments. Dead planets bloomed with impossible gardens. The others feared us. Celestine's voice joined Zephyr's in harmonious explanation. They saw our power and imagined destruction, but we sought only to share the joy we had discovered. Love, true love, is the fundamental creative force of the universe. We had learned to channel it consciously. The vision shifted, showing her the arrival of F. Cross's grandfather and his expedition. The humans had come with weapons designed to disrupt psychic connections. Technology that could sever the bond between consciousness. They saw Zephyr and Celestine not as lovers, but as a threat to cosmic stability. We tried to explain, Zephyr continued, their mental voice heavy with ancient grief. But they would not listen. They believed that power of this magnitude must be contained, regardless of its benevolent nature. Jade watched in horror as the expedition used their psychic disruptors to tear the lovers apart. Celestine's scream of anguish echoed across dimensions. As she was banished to a pocket universe, while Zephyr was imprisoned in a crystalline matrix designed to dampen their consciousness. The separation had been so traumatic that both beings had nearly died from the psychic shock. For 3,000 years, I have called to her across the void. Zephyr's voice broke with emotion. I do not know if she still lives, if she can hear my signal. If the love we shared survives in some form, you are the first consciousness powerful enough to hear my plea and wise enough to understand the truth. Jade opened her eyes to find Cross standing in her doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and something deeper. You were gone for over an hour, he said quietly. Your life signs were so faint that the medical sensors triggered an alert. She sat up slowly, still processing the emotional weight of what she'd experienced. They're telling the truth, Cross. Your grandfather's expedition didn't imprison a monster. They destroyed the most beautiful love story in the galaxy because they were afraid of what they didn't understand. Cross entered her quarters and sat on the edge of her bed, his presence comforting and real after the cosmic vastness of Zephyr's memories. Even if that's true, Jade, the fact remains that their bond caused reality distortions on a massive scale. How do we know that freeing Zephyr won't destabilize local space again? Because I've seen their true nature, she replied, reaching out to take his hand. Zephyr and Celestine aren't destructive forces. They're creative ones. The distortions your grandfather reported were actually evolutionary accelerations. Weren't threatening the galaxy, they were helping it grow. Cross intertwined his fingers with hers, and she felt the warmth of human connection contrasting with the cosmic vastness of her alien link. I'm scared I'm losing you to them, he admitted, quietly. Every day you seem a little more distant, a little more connected to something I can't touch or understand. The confession hit her harder than any alien revelation. She'd been so focused on Zephyr's pain that she'd neglected to consider how her growing psychic bond might be affecting her relationships in the real world. Cross had been patient and supportive, but she could see the strain in his eyes. You're not losing me, she said, squeezing his hand. But I can't ignore Zephyr's suffering either. They've been alone for 3 millennia, Cross. Can you imagine that kind of isolation? Before he could answer, the station's emergency klaxons began blaring. Dr. Blackwood's voice echoed through the communication system, tight with professional alarm. All senior staff to the main laboratory? We have a situation. They hurried through the corridors to find Dr. Blackwood standing before a massive holographic display showing local space around the station. Jade gasped at what she saw. Reality itself was beginning to warp around Horizon 7, space twisting into impossible geometries as Zephyr's growing psychic strength interacted with her own enhanced consciousness. The alien's influence is spreading, Dr. Blackwood announced grimly. These reality distortions match the historical records from 3,000 years ago. If this continues, the local space-time continuum could collapse entirely. Zephyr's presence in her mind, their consciousness touched with both hope and desperation. I grow stronger as our bond deepens, they explained. But without Celestine to balance my essence, my power becomes chaotic. Jade, she is the missing half of my soul. Then we help them find Celestine, Jade said aloud, turning to face Cross and Dr. Blackwood. It's not enough to contain Zephyr. Need to reunite them with their lost love. Dr. Blackwood looked at her as if she'd suggested launching herself into a black hole. Absolutely not. The risks are incalculable. I have no idea where this Celestine entity is located, or even if they still exist. Attempting to reunite them could trigger reality distortions on an unprecedented scale. The risks of not reuniting them are worse, Jade countered, feeling Zephyr's desperate hope flowing through their connection. Zephyr's power is growing unstable because they're incomplete. Find Celestine, and they can balance each other again. Cross studied the spatial distortion readings, his command training warring with his personal feelings. How would we even locate this Celestine? We're talking about searching an entire galaxy for a being that was banished to a pocket dimension 3,000 years ago. Through her link with Zephyr, Jade suddenly understood. We don't search for Celestine, she said slowly. We let Celestine find us. Zephyr's signal has been growing stronger as our bond deepens. If Celestine is still alive somewhere in the universe, they'll be able to sense their lover's awakening consciousness. The station shuddered around them as another reality distortion rippled outward. Through the observation windows, they could see space itself bending, stars appearing to move in impossible patterns as the fabric of existence strained under Zephyr's unbalanced power. We're running out of time, Cross said grimly. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide quickly. Station can't withstand much more of this. Jade closed her eyes and reached out through her psychic link, calling to Zephyr with all the strength her human consciousness could muster. Show them, she whispered. Show Cross and Dr. Blackwood what your love really looked like. Help them understand what we're fighting to restore. Zephyr's response was immediate and overwhelming. The laboratory filled with ghostly images of the crystal world, showing the three humans what the universe had looked like when love flowed freely through its very foundations. They saw civilizations flourishing under the gentle influence of pure creative force, dead worlds blooming with impossible life, consciousness itself evolving toward higher forms of existence. This is what we offered the galaxy. Zephyr's voice echoed through all their minds. Not destruction, but transformation. Not chaos, but growth, guided by love's wisdom. Help me find Celestine, and together we can show your species what becomes possible when love transcends all boundaries. The vision faded, leaving them all emotionally shaken. Dr. Blackwood stared at her instruments with a new understanding dawning in her eyes. If even half of that is true, she whispered, then we've been looking at this situation entirely wrong. Cross turned to Jade, his gray eyes reflecting both fear and determination. If we do this, if we help reunite them, you might lose your human perspective entirely. The psychic bond required to locate Celestine could transform you into something that's no longer entirely human. Jade felt the truth of his concern, but also the certainty that some risks were worth taking. Maybe becoming more than human isn't something to fear, she said quietly. Maybe it's something to embrace. The station shuddered again, and alarms began blaring as the reality distortions intensified. Whatever they were going to decide, time was running out rapidly. The answer came from the void itself, arriving like a whisper that had traveled across eternity. Jade felt it first as a tremor in her consciousness, a resonance that made her psychic bond with Zephyr ring like a struck bell. She was in the station's communication array, attempting to calibrate the equipment for long-range scanning, when the sensation hit her with overwhelming force. She hears us, Jade whispered, her hands frozen over the control panel. Through her link with Zephyr, she could feel an approaching presence of unimaginable power and beauty. Celestine is coming. Cross was beside her instantly, his face tight with concern. Over the past week, as the reality distortions around Horizon 7 had intensified, he'd barely left her side. The psychic strain of maintaining her connection with Zephyr was taking a visible toll. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements had taken on an otherworldly grace that worried him more than any alien threat. How far? He asked, checking the long-range sensors. The instrument showed nothing but empty space. But he'd learned to trust Jade's enhanced perceptions over mechanical readings. Distance doesn't matter to her anymore, Jade replied, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there a month ago. She exists partially outside normal space-time. But Cross, there's something else. Something Zephyr didn't tell us about their imprisonment. Dr. Blackwood hurried into the communication bay, her usually perfect composure showing cracks of strain. The past week had challenged every assumption she'd held about consciousness, reality, and the nature of love itself. Her scientific instruments registered phenomena that shouldn't exist, while her personal observations of Jade's transformation forced her to reconsider everything she thought she knew about human potential. The spatial distortions are accelerating, she reported. At current rates, local spacetime will become completely unstable within 12 hours. We need to evacuate the station before reality becomes too twisted to support human life. But Jade shook her head, her attention focused on something beyond their immediate concerns. We can't leave. If we're not here when Celestine arrives, they might not be able to maintain coherent form in normal space. The reunion has to happen. Here, where Zephyr's consciousness is anchored by our equipment. Through the psychic link, Zephyr's presence pressed against her mind with desperate urgency. Tell them the full truth, dear Jade. Tell them what my grandfather's expedition really did to us. Jade closed her eyes, allowing Zephyr's memories to flow through her consciousness one final time. What she saw made her gasp with horror and understanding. The expedition hadn't simply separated two lovers. They had torn apart a single consciousness that had achieved perfect unity. Zephyr and Celestine weren't two beings who loved each other completely. They were one being whose love had become so pure that it had split into complementary aspects of a greater whole. They're not separate entities, she said aloud, opening eyes that now carried flecks of alien starlight. Zephyr and Celestine are two halves of the same soul. When your grandfather's expedition separated them, they literally broke apart a unified consciousness. For 3,000 years, both halves have been incomplete, dying slowly from the psychological trauma of being torn away from themselves. Cross felt the blood drain from his face. That means the reality distortions aren't caused by their power interacting. They're caused by a consciousness trying to heal itself across impossible distances. Dr. Blackwood's scientific mind raced. Through the implications? If that's true, then reuniting them isn't just about love. It's about preventing the complete psychic collapse of a cosmic-level intelligence. The distortions we're seeing might be just the beginning. The station's emergency klaxons began blaring as space around them twisted into configurations that hurt to look at directly. Through the observation windows, they could see stars bending into spirals, nebulae folding in on themselves, and the very geometry of existence becoming something alien and strange. She's almost here, Jade whispered, her consciousness stretching across dimensions to touch the approaching presence. But Cross, there's something you need to know. When Zephyr and Celestine reunite, the psychic energy released will transform everything in the immediate area. Anyone with strong enough mental resonance could be caught in the transformation wave. Cross understood immediately. You're saying that when they merge back into a single consciousness, you might be pulled into that unity as well? It's possible, she admitted, turning to face him with eyes that held both human love and cosmic understanding. The bond between Zephyr and me has grown strong enough that I might become part of their restored consciousness. I might cease to exist as an individual human being. The thought of losing her struck Cross like a physical blow. Over the past month, he'd watched Jade evolve into something magnificent and terrifying, her consciousness expanding far beyond normal human limits. But beneath all the cosmic awareness and alien knowledge, she was still the woman who had captured his heart with her brilliant mind and compassionate spirit. There has to be another way, he said desperately. Some way to help them reunite, without losing yourself in the process. But before Jade could answer, space around the station erupted in cascades of impossible light. Reality folded like origami as Celestine's presence materialized in local space-time, her consciousness so vast and radiant that human instruments could only register her arrival as a complete failure of physics. Jade cried out as the psychic impact hit her her consciousness suddenly flooded with 3,000 years of Celestine's accumulated love, longing, and desperate hope. Through the link, she experienced the other half of the cosmic love story, Celestine's exile in a pocket dimension where time moved differently. Her endless search through alternative realities for any trace of her missing complement, her growing realization that she was slowly fading away without Zephyr's balancing presence. My beloved Celestine's voice echoed through every consciousness on the station, a sound like music made from pure emotion. I have found you at last. Let us heal. What was broken? Let us become whole again. Zephyr's response shook the station's superstructure, a crystalline prison finally shattering under the force of their joy. The alien consciousness materialized in the communication bay as a figure of living starlight, their form shifting and flowing as emotions too vast for individual minds to contain played across their being. For 3 millennia I have carried half a heart, Zephyr said, their voice harmonizing with Celestine's in ways that made reality itself sing. Now we can be complete once more. The two cosmic lovers moved toward each other with the inevitability of celestial mechanics, but as they approached, the psychic energy building between them began to warp space-time in ways that threatened to tear the station apart. Jade felt herself being pulled into their gravitational field of consciousness, her individual identity beginning to dissolve into something infinitely larger. Cross shouted, stepping between the approaching cosmic beings. If you reunite, here, you'll destroy this station and everyone on it. And you'll absorb Jade's consciousness in the process. Is that the price of your love? Both alien entities paused, their reunion halted by the humans' desperate intervention. For a moment, silence filled the communication bay, broken only by the groaning of the station's superstructure under impossible stresses. We do not wish to cause harm, Celestine said softly, her radiant form dimming slightly. We have been incomplete for so long. The need to heal ourselves is overwhelming every other consideration. Cross turned to Jade, his heart breaking. As he saw her wavering between human and cosmic consciousness, choose, he said quietly. Choose to stay human. Choose to stay with me. The decision tore at her soul. Through her link with Zephyr, she could feel the infinite possibilities that awaited her in cosmic consciousness. She could become part of something vast and beautiful. Invitations transcended in favor of universal understanding. But she could also feel Cross's love, achingly human and wonderfully limited, offering her a different kind of completion. There's a third option, Dr. Blackwood said suddenly. Her scientific mind, finding a solution that her heart could accept. What if they don't reunite here? What if we help them find a location where their merger won't endanger anyone, where the reality distortions can safely dissipate across empty space? Jade felt hope kindle in both Zephyr and Celestine as they considered the possibility. Crystal World, she said softly. Their original home. If we can guide them back there, they can reunite safely while restoring the evolutionary paradise they once created. But how do we get them there without triggering the merger prematurely? Cross asked. The moment they get too close to each other, their consciousness will start combining automatically. Through her psychic link, Jade suddenly understood. They don't travel there together. One of them stays here while the other goes ahead to prepare the space. Then, when everything is ready, the second follows. I will go first, Celestine offered immediately. I have learned to navigate alternative dimensions during my exile. I can prepare our homeworld for reunion, while Zephyr remains anchored here. Cross felt relief wash over him as he realized what this meant. And Jade's psychic link with Zephyr would anchor them to this location until Celestine signals that it's safe to follow. But Zephyr's form flickered with uncertainty. To be separated again, even briefly, after finding each other once more, the risk is enormous. What if something goes wrong? What if we lose each other again? Jade stepped forward, her consciousness fully committed to helping the cosmic lovers find their way home. I'll maintain the link between you. My human perspective can serve as a bridge, keeping you connected across any distance until you're safely reunited. The sacrifice inherent in her offer was clear to everyone present. Maintaining a psychic bridge across interstellar distances would require her to pour all of her enhanced consciousness into the connection. She would survive, but she would return to being purely human, losing all the cosmic awareness and expanded abilities that her bond with Zephyr had given her. Cross felt his heart swell with love and admiration for her choice. She was choosing to help the alien lovers find their happiness, while preserving her own humanity and their relationship. The cost to her personally would be enormous. "You don't have to do this," he said softly. "There might be other ways." "This is the right way," she replied, taking his hand and squeezing it gently. "Love isn't about possessing or being possessed. It's about helping those you care about find their own path to happiness, even when that path leads them away from you." Celestine's radiant form pulsed with gratitude. "Your wisdom surpasses that of many cosmic consciousnesses, dear human. We will remember your gift across all the eons of our existence." The farewell was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Jade felt Zephyr's consciousness embrace hers one final time, sharing the complete scope of their love story and the gratitude that would endure across eternity. Then Celestine began to fade from local space-time, her consciousness traveling back toward the distant crystal world that awaited their reunion.